Freedom is one of those words that really just resounds inside of us, isn't it? The idea of being free. I love to watch movies about people who experience freedom. I love to hear stories about somebody who was stuck in something and finds freedom from it. I love watching as people in our church who I get to live life on life with. I love watching people find freedom from their addiction, from the things that have held them back. Freedom is something that idea even is like hardwired into us as Westerners, as people who grew up and live in the Western Hemisphere, as people who live in the United States. The idea of freedom is a core value. It's of high importance for us. But my experience has been just maybe talking to people, getting to live that life-on-life relationship with people. What I've recognized is that for people, most people live in slavery to something, live in slavery to their story, maybe some of the pain that you've experienced in the past. Or maybe we live in slavery to a chemical, some sort of addiction or some sort of thing. Or we live in slavery to something that doesn't like resound in, like was something we really want. We live in slavery of the pursuit of something. And what I've come to recognize is what Chris said last week is so true, that being free and living free are two very, very different things. You can be free and never live free. And that is exactly why we put this series together. Because we want, as a part of your next step here at Journey Church, we want to help you take your next step toward living free of some really big pieces and very important parts of your life, because you are free. So please recognize, lean into the thing that is your freedom, that lean into being free and living free as a part of your life. Kind of the centerpiece or the cornerstone for this whole series together is this verse from Galatians chapter 5. It says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set you free." Now I want to get real quick, and we got to make sure we kind of wrap our minds around this, that Christ did the work of setting us free so that we could experience freedom. It is for your freedom, for you living free, that Christ did the work to set you free. Stand firm then. Don't let yourselves be burdened again by the yoke of slavery. Chris did a great job last week and kind of launched us into this about how easy it is for us to lean into the idea of freedom, but how easy it is for us to kind of go back to the things that are familiar, because we lived a long time in the yoke of slavery. So my hope is that today you're going to take your next step in recognizing that being free and living free are two very, very different ideas. And my hope is that you'll be able to identify ways that you can live free rather than just be set free. So here's the thing that is interesting to me. As I've talked with people over the years, what I've recognized is that most people live with a sense of nostalgia about elementary school. You know, remember those days, right? You might remember fondly the smell of Play-Doh in the air. Or my friend Dennis, when I was in elementary school, he had crayons that were scented. Like when he would color, you could smell strawberries, right? That was cool. And I remember thinking that. And there were little bits of social pressure here and there. But for the most part, there was this great idea of belonging in elementary school. You know why? Because teachers work hard to protect that environment. We recognize that those are forming formidable years in a kid's life. And so we do a great job of sitting everybody down together, and everybody gets a chance to be the class leader, and everybody gets a chance to win at something, and we encourage people all the time. And if you did something wrong and you hurt somebody's feelings, said something wrong, or maybe you pushed somebody on the playground, you went home with a note pinned to your shirt, right? And you had to tell your mom that you mistreated somebody. And the teacher, your mom and dad, and everybody involved would protect everybody else. That's why people have a tendency to think positively or remember with nostalgia the idea of elementary school. But then there's high school. People have a tendency to remember high school with a sense of nostalgia. right? You might remember when you achieved whatever it was you were working for. You got to be first chair in the orchestra or the band, or you achieved a certain grade at a certain test, or maybe in a class, or you maintained a certain GPA and you worked toward a task and accomplished it. You might remember that sense of victory with a little bit of nostalgia. Or maybe you remember like your athletic prowess in high school. You're like, oh, I was all that, right? I was the all-state this, or I played on this team and we did this really well, or I led the team to this. You had the high scoring record. Maybe that was something that you remember with a sense of nostalgia, the accomplishment. You know what I remember about high school? I remember the fact that with nostalgia, that I could heal quickly back then. Right? If I turned my ankle doing something, like 2 days later, it didn't even hurt anymore, right? But now if I turn my ankle, for that matter, if I just get out of bed wrong, right? I could be like completely incapacitated for days, right? Because my body doesn't do that anymore. People will remember elementary school with nostalgia. People will remember high school with nostalgia. You know what I don't hear a lot of? People talking about their middle school days positively, right? Because those are the awkward days, right? Your body's changing. And for a lot of people, our bodies outgrow our coordination. We were coordinated when we were this tall, and then all of a sudden we got tall and lanky and just didn't catch up just the same way, right? Or you think things, and then they come out of your mouth, and you're like, oh, I haven't learned to filter myself. And all that sense of awkwardness that's represented in middle school. The hormones are rushing in, and people try to explain it, and you want to talk about it awkward. It's not just feeling the hormones, right? It's having somebody try to explain all the hormones, and your body is changing, and all the things that are weird about middle school. Somebody sits you down and tells you about birds and bees, and it doesn't involve birds and bees, for crying out loud, and I don't really understand that one. And all the awkwardness comes in. And it's awkward all day long at school, right? Like the lines for lunch are longer. Right, and then all of a sudden the big people all barge their way to the front and take the last chocolate milk so they can get back to grading papers, right? It's awkward and everything feels weird about middle school. Nobody remembers it positively. The idea that parents or that teachers would sit us down inside of a room and then call on one of us to stand up and read aloud. Oh, that's awkward, right? Especially when your voice is changing, and you start talking and they do this thing and you're trying to focus and get your thing, and then they do the worst thing teachers do, right? Teachers go, it's okay, Jeremy, take your time. Oh, you feel like such an idiot all of a sudden, right? Take your time. Don't tell me to take my time. I'm already feel like I can't read. Now you just kind of brought attention to it. Now the whole class not only knows my voice is changing, but that, you get what I'm going at, right? It's an awkward time. It's weird. All of it, every part of it is weird. Nobody remembers with nostalgia the idea of middle school. I remember a teacher telling us that, you should challenge yourself. So I challenged myself. I'm going to see if I can put off studying until the very last second and still pass the test. I could not. And you know what? She had the nerve to fail me. Even though I did what she said to do, I challenged myself. It's an awkward time. You make stupid decisions. Things are awkward for you. Everything feels off and weird. And the worst part about it is in the middle of all of that awkwardness, things are forming around you that will change the trajectory of your life. They're called social groups, cliques, groups of friends, right? These social groups are forming. There's a circle of the smart kids over here, and they're kind of tending to rally together. There's a group of kind of like metalheads over here, right? And you got the group of jocks over here, and you got the cheerleaders over there, and those groups kind of overlap and mesh a little here and there, but for the most part, they keep separate. Then you got the names of all those groups, and they change over time. Maybe your group called them different things than we did, but the truth of it is that those groups are forming, and there is something inside of us that wants to be a part of that group. C.S. Lewis, one of the great thinkers of our time, had a word for it. He called it the inner ring. And we want to be a part of the inner ring. Now, this one is a quote from C.S. Lewis, and I want us to work our way through it for a second. He says, "I believe that in all men's lives at certain periods, and in many men's lives at all periods between infancy and extreme old age, one of the most dominant elements is the desire to be in the local ring and the terror of being left out of it." Like, what he's saying is that everybody experiences this at some time, and some people experience it at all times between birth and death. The desire to be in the local ring and that fear, that terror of being left out of the local ring. That centerpiece, like, I want to be a part of that crowd of people, and I will work to get in there. And it's hardwired in us. You ever done anything that you weren't proud of to get into a group of people? I know I have. I remember one particular time I was in the 8th grade, the first time, and I was in the 8th grade, and I walked out toward the buses, and there were groups of people getting onto different buses, going to different places, and I was heading toward my bus's stop, and this guy named Eric stopped me. Now, Eric had bullied me a lot, and he was part of the group that I really desperately wanted to be a part of. I just wanted to be accepted by anybody, but if I could be in that crowd or in that group, it would be that would be fantastic. If they were my friends, my life would have been easy, I thought. Then what Eric did was he started acting nice to me, and I'm like, what's up with this? This is great. This is one of the best days of my life. And Eric said to me, "Hey, you know what you ought to do? You should pinch Amy's butt." And I'm like, what are you talking about? Amy was one of the very few girls that were really nice to me. I mean, like, she was actually never mean to me, never did a single thing, but he said, you should pinch her butt. And I couldn't figure, I'm like, I don't know what to do, but I really desperately wanted to be a part of that group of people. And I felt like if I did what he was saying, that I could magically, like in a second, find my way into this inner ring, to this social crowd. And I remember reaching over and pinching Amy. You know what I didn't realize? Is that up until that moment, Eric and his friends had been harassing Amy and pushing and kind of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And before I got there, Amy had told them, "If you touch me one more time, I'm going to spray you with this pepper spray." They had primed it all the way up, and I did something that I'm not proud of. I'm ashamed of. I treated Amy in a way that she would not want to be treated, and she turned around and she pepper sprayed me, and I got that stuff all in my eyes. It was terrible. All because I wanted to be a part of a ring of people that I didn't really even like. I didn't really want to be a part of. I just wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be loved. Have you ever, think back on your life, have you ever done anything that you regret just to be liked by a group of people? You ever, maybe in a break room, talked about somebody who wasn't in the break room? You ever, like, spoken down about something or stolen something, or maybe cut a corner in business because you wanted to be successful, because successful people get acceptance? And we do those things, all of us. My guess is there's not a single person here. There's not a single person online. There's not a single person who will ever listen to these words who hasn't done something, maybe even a lot of things that you're not proud of, that you're in fact ashamed of, that you did so that you could fit into a group of people. Maybe you've even done that at church. Maybe you've thought less of somebody else. Maybe you've talked about those people, the people who sin differently than you, so that you could fit into a group of people. Maybe today you think of that way, so that you could fit into a group of people. Man, I just want us to get that kind of desire, that brokenness in us, that wants to belong, it's hardwired in us. I want us to understand this, that God designed you and me with an innate desire to be accepted and to be loved. That desire that you feel to be inside the inner ring, that thing that you're hoping so big for, and what he says being a part of it, or the terror of being left out of it, God put that desire there. If you rewind the story all the way back to the beginning in the Garden of Eden, God created Adam and Eve with this unbelievable belonging, They were fully and completely accepted and loved in the perfect sense, no matter what in their life. They were perfectly loved. They had perfect community, perfect connection with God. That was what was broken in us when we walked away and did things our own way. God designed them to be accepted and loved, and humankind has longed for it in every day since then. Your life, mine. We long for that acceptance. We want to be a part of a group of people that accept and love us because that's innately designed in us to belong. It's one of the things that's not just you or not just me, and it's not just our culture. It's been like that for generations. In fact, in the Bible, it happens all the time. In fact, there's one particular place where you might be familiar with the names Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, and a man named Peter, who is a disciple of Jesus, one of the 12. Yeah, Peter had worked in a community. The gospel had gotten outside of just the Jewish people, right? The gospel, when Jesus died, became available to people who weren't Jewish. Up until that point, all of the law was just written for the Jewish people. And when Jesus died, he died not just for the Jewish people, but for people like us who maybe aren't Jewish. And so, but there was a tension. There was a contrast between these Jewish people who felt like insiders and these Gentile people who felt like outsiders. And there were times where people struggled. And one of the people that struggled was that guy named Peter, who was one of Jesus' disciples. You see, Paul had to address this. Look at what Galatians chapter 2 says. It says, when Peter first arrived, he ate with the Gentile believers. He would hang out with them. He would go to their house, right? Who were not circumcised. But afterward, when some of friends of James came, Peter wouldn't eat with the Gentiles anymore. He was afraid of the criticism from these people who insisted on the necessity of circumcision. See what happened? You get what's going on. Real people like Peter struggled. They wanted to be accepted by the in crowd. And he struggled at times. When they weren't there, he hung out with the Gentiles. But when they showed up, all of a sudden, he didn't want to be so close with them anymore. Paul rebuked him. He took him to task and said, I had to publicly talk to Peter about this issue because that is not the way we should behave. But why is it that we struggle that way? Why is it that you and I struggle to want to belong, and we'll do anything to belong, but then when we act differently, we're not proud of it? There's a broken piece in us that wants to belong, that needs to belong, and will do anything to do it, but then we wind up looking back on our actions, like I did with that interaction with Amy, with extreme shame. Like you've felt that way. You thought of that thing that you did or those times that you've acted poorly trying to fit in. And now all of a sudden you look back and go, oh man, I so messed that up. I'm so ashamed of the way I spoke about that person or that thing I did to fit in. And you know full well that that's not where you want to be. And that's the thing we need to figure out, is that we can't get better kind of in the past. We can't live out of regret. Can I get that to us real quick? Is that regret that you feel about yesterday? It is not going to serve you well. Regretting won't help you, right? It'll never really help you. Looking back at your yesterday and feeling shame and guilt about yesterday is never going to help you move forward. And understanding what you've experienced in the past will really never help you move forward. Feeling guilty about yesterday won't help you, and understanding information in your head about the way you should act will not help you. What we have to do is realize something. Now, I don't mean realize. When we say realize, I hope you realize this issue, right? I hope you realize that you've been set free. Well, realizing that I've been set free is not the same as living it out, isn't it? Realizing it is making my understanding become real in my life. Let me say that again. Realizing is making my understanding in my head come out of my hands, come out of my life. Realizing is making something real in your life. And so if you want to find kind of redemption, in this story, if you want to live free in terms of our need for approval, our desire to be approved of, if you want to live free where you no longer do things that you're ashamed of to try and get into a group of people, where you no longer need to be accepted by that group, then you and I don't just need to understand something. We don't need to feel guilty about yesterday. We don't need to understand information. What we need to do is realize some things, realize them, make them real in our life. And so I'd start with this word. You need to realize your true identity. I love this verse in the book of Romans. It says, "So you have not received a spirit that makes you fearful slaves. Instead, you've received God's Spirit when he adopted you as his own children. And now we call him Abba, Father." This is a great thing for us to get, because our true identity, who you really are, is not this kind of like you've been just kind of tossed in. He says that we've been adopted. We've been adopted as God's own children. Your true identity of belonging is not somebody who's been added in. You've been grafted in. You've been made, adopted, chosen as part of God's family. And because of it, we get to call him Abba. That's a profound word, and one that we didn't retranslate when we put it in. Abba is an extreme term of affection. It's like calling him daddy. You and I, because of what Jesus has done, if we've been set free, if we've given our life to Jesus, then you and I, our Abba, daddy, has set us free. We have full access to God. Now, understand something. Living in guilt about what you've done yesterday won't help you. Understanding the information we're talking about here is not going to help you. If you want to find freedom, to live in freedom from the need to be accepted by people like that, to try and find your way into the inner ring, if you want to find freedom, you have to realize your true identity. Not just understand it, but to make your true identity real in your life. We lean into, like Chris said last week, we lean into and grab onto, right? We grab on to this idea that we are adopted as children of God. So when we lean into it and we grab onto that, all of a sudden when we begin to say, you know what? I'm fully loved and accepted by the King of Kings, right? By the God who created the universe. So this group of people that I'm trying to whittle my way into doesn't matter so much anymore. All of a sudden, when we begin to lean into and grab onto, right? We let go of what we used to be. We grab onto and lean into what our new identity is. Then you and I have the opportunity to start devaluing the acceptance of others and realizing the value of our true identity. I think the next thing that we can do is to realize, again, don't just understand, but make it real in your life, your true calling. God has a calling for your life and for mine. And we'll never be able to achieve our calling if we're trying to find our way into a group of people. You know, the other thing that's interesting about those groups of people is that once you get into a group of people, you know what you recognize? Is that there's even a more selective group of people right in the middle of it. And then if you work your way toward that group of people, there's even more people inside another inner circle, another inner ring for always for us to achieve acceptance by. But when we realize our true identity, when we begin to live out and realize our true calling, then we are able to accomplish what God wants us to do. It says we are God's, this is again our identity, masterpiece. You are God's masterpiece. He's perfectly designed you for this. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the good things that he planned for us a long time ago. Now, get what he's saying. You are God's masterpiece. You're fully accepted. You're fully loved. You're fully valued. You're adopted into. Your true identity is realized, and you're, as his masterpiece, perfectly designed to do good things that he's already planned for you to do. God has tasks, things that he needs from you so that you can build his kingdom around himself. And he has called you to do those things. And if we can realize our true identity as masterpieces, as adopted children who get to cry out, Abba, Daddy, Father, and we are able to accomplish the good things that he's done. All of a sudden, the value of that group of people isn't so hot in our life anymore. Again, this isn't about you feeling guilty about yesterday and the things that you've done. You can't get better in hindsight. You have to get better in real time. And it's not about you recognizing your true identity. It's about you realizing your true identity and realizing your true calling. And also, then you'll, as a result, realize your true audience. Who is the audience that you play out your life for? Who is the audience that you are living your life to please? You see, when we don't live out of our true identity and we don't live out of our true calling, when we don't realize our true identity and our true calling, then we have a tendency to live our life for the wrong audience. But when you and I choose to let go of our old identity and grab onto and lean into our new identity, we have an opportunity to recognize that we don't live our life to play for the audience of many, that we're called and we understand and realize that we play for an audience of one. In 2017, the NFL allowed players to design custom cleats, and in the process, they got to design custom cleats for their own cause. They were called My Cleats, My Claws, and they were allowed to design them for childhood diabetes or for freedom from sex trafficking or whatever their cause was. A group of Philadelphia Eagles designed cleats centered around the cause that was most important to them, and it was them playing for an audience of one. Check this out.
So the NFL gave us as players the opportunity for week 13 of the NFL season to customize cleats for a cause that's really near and dear to our hearts. So my teammates and myself got together and we figured we'd share the most important thing in our lives, and that's our faith. So now check out the cleats and the verse that we chose to use.
So we wanted to choose a verse that really summed up the gospel message clearly. And we came up with Romans 5:8, which states, "But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us." Now how cool is that? The creator of the universe loved us so much that he sent his only son to die for all of humanity. Now let's check out the design on the other side of the cleat.
On this side of the cleat, we have the logo for AO1. And for the mural, we decided to go with the greatest day in human history. From the cross to the open tomb, God shows his great love for us. This is the one that we play for. It's not about making our name famous. It's about making his name known to all mankind in everything that we do.
So, what does AO1 mean to us?
It means that we are playing for an audience of one. When the lights go on and all eyes are fixed on us,
our eyes are fixed on him.
Jesus, the creator of the universe.
It's not just a slogan, it's a lifestyle.
Living for him, playing for him, and giving him all the glory.
Win, lose, or draw.
I play, I play, I play.
I play for an audience of one. What about you?
Those are some pretty powerful words, aren't they? When the lights go up and all the eyes are on me, my eyes are on him. Can I just challenge you to do something? Can I just challenge you to find and experience? Can I challenge you to live in the freedom that you've been given, that you no longer have to play out your life for the approval of the many, that when the lights go up, however big the lights are, and all the eyes, however many of them there are all on you, that your eyes are on him, and that you live your life for an audience of one approval. Only God can judge me. And I don't mean that in a pushy way or in a way that kind of just says, you can't judge me. What I mean is that only God judges my value, that I am his masterpiece. I am his adopted son. And because of his work to set me free, I can call out to him, Abba, Daddy, Father, I love you and I'm loved by you. Only God can bring value to my life. And as a result, I no longer have to strive to be inside of the inner ring, and I no longer have to experience the terror of being left out of it. Can I tell you this? That you are loved and accepted. That God has loved and accepted you. You've been set free from the need for approval. Now, the trick is, will you choose to live free from the need for approval?